So, welcome back to the Slice of Time Street Photography Podcast, yet another episode. Today I'm here with Wei Jian Chan, a street photographer originally from Singapore, but now based in London, which is something we'll probably discuss since it's also a topic from his new book. Browsing through his work, for me, what stood out was, first of all, the intense black and white compositions, very strong compositions. And also they reminded me of a mix between two masters, mostly Henri Cartier Bresson and Van Ho. So I'm curious to look into his inspirations there. So yeah, maybe you could introduce yourself first for a second.
Nice to meet you, Fred. My name is Wei Jian, and as you've mentioned, I'm a street photographer. I shoot mainly black and white street photography, and I've got a fascination with visual motifs like anonymity, geometry, and I have quite a formal visual language with my photography. As you mentioned earlier, I have a new photo book out with Setanta Books. It's called Journey to the West, and it's sort of inspired by the early years of moving from Singapore to London. And through the book, through my street photography, I've tried to evoke a sense of the dislocation and uncertainty that I felt as a migrant in the early years.
That's a very interesting. Well, of course, the book isn't out at the time of our recording, so I haven't seen it yet. I've seen some snippets on the website. So, is it because you're in London for like 10 or 15 years almost now? No, or
so this is my 13th year in London, actually.
13th years.
And at the time I was sort of sequencing the book, it was just about the end of my first decade. And also roughly the time when I obtained my residency in the UK. And so it was a point where I had a lot of feelings about moving to the UK. And I think it kind of bubbled up in my street photography in terms of the things that caught my eye, the things I decided to photograph, and sort of the directions I took with my work. So perhaps just expand a bit on that and tell the story of how I came to this theme. I sort of been photographing since I was a kid, since I was about 14. And in 2019, I had sort of, this period where I was searching for a new direction to take my photography. So I experimented with a few genres. I actually tried out making some wildlife images. I tried out making some landscape images. And I realized that these genres didn't really fit with my lifestyle because due to work commitments, it's difficult for me to head out to the country and make landscape images. And where I sort of landed was street photography, just because I found it an incredibly accessible form of photography. All I have to do is step out of my front door and I can make photographs. I can make photographs on the way back home from work, on the way to work, and on the weekends. It's something that fits quite neatly into a lifestyle. And with my photography, I've generally been interested by people, and to me, street photography is inherently about human stories. And it's just, you mentioned Henri Cartier-Bresson earlier, that there's a big sort of humanist tradition to it, and so that was another thing that made me fall into it. So I began working. I fell into this pattern really of photographing in black and white, and sort of developed a distinctive, I think, visual language along the way, which had been one of my goals. And around 2021, I had this body of work that needed a bit of organizing. There were a lot of images that looked coherent in a similar visual style, but I was trying to figure out what I had to say. And so that began the sequencing and editing process. And let me tell you something, sequencing and editing I find so much harder than the photographing, because photographing is very instinctive. You just head out, whatever catches your eye, you photograph. And the intellectual work, the hard miles are done in the sequencing bit. And that's when you go from having a collection of photographs, a portfolio, to having a coherent body of work. And that, I think, is the key step that an artist, as a photographic artist, has to take. And so it took many iterations. I went down a lot of rabbit holes. So initially, I started by sort of categorizing my images, images that were made in rain, images of, perhaps hard light, and that ended up being an ineffective way to edit and sequence a body of work, because then what you have is a catalog, not a book. And then I started thinking about perhaps I worked a lot in London. Maybe I make a photo book about London. And then I realized, Matt Stewart's done that. It's been done to death. And I felt I didn't have anything original to say about London.
So first you didn't have the story about about your book. What was it title again? Going
It's
West?
called Journey to the West.
Journey to the West. Sorry, yeah. So it wasn't really like the original idea. You first wanted to make a book, and then you started looking through your photos. What could be a project, or am I misunderstanding now?
No, I think I'd put it this way. I was trying to make sense of my photographs. I was trying to understand what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, I had at that point maybe 40,000 plus images I made. And, obviously not all successful. Many failures along the way. Street photography happens.
Yeah.
But, I had this core of maybe a couple hundred images that I felt were interesting, but that didn't, as an edit of a couple hundred images, tell a story. Yeah. And so I wanted to piece it together. And that was sort of the path I took towards producing this book.
Okay, cool. And then you started sequencing in Lightroom, or how did you start making those connections in your stories with the photos you already had?
So the initial cull is done in Lightroom because, to print 40,000 images is not untenable. So I cut it down to maybe, you sort of know what your what images you like. And you go through your collection, you pick those that you think are interesting. And so I had it down to maybe 200 plus that I printed out onto little 4x6 prints, nice and cheap at local sort of print shop. And then I sort of just laid them out in my apartment. So it was, at one point it was covering my dining table, my coffee table, my floor, put them up on the walls. You sort of live with them. You look at them every night when you come home from work, and you just try to figure out how they fit together and what goes with what. And along the way, you start looking for sequences. So, you start with the sort of, go from the atoms to the molecules, don't you? So the atom is the individual image and the molecule would be the diptych. Two images that perhaps say something together, and the whole is a bit more than the sum of its parts. So I found a couple of diptychs along the way, found images that sort of flowed from one to the other that individually tell a story. And then through these little sequences, you build the longer chain that becomes the book.
Okay, yeah, that's very, very interesting. And to me, because I saw you do both digital and analog, was it hard to combine photos from those two mediums, or did you already like select only one medium, like only the digital files, or how did you combine those two?
So film and digital, they fundamentally, they are very different technical processes, aren't they? But fundamentally, when I go out, I'm not looking for different things. I'm still looking for the same kind of light.
Okay.
I think at that point, I subconsciously looking at the same sort of themes in my photographs, and so the sort of image acquisition process is different. With digital, you just connect your card to your computer and you're done. With film, you've got to actually develop the film and scan it. But ultimately, I think the images fit together because they had a coherence through the sort of underlying thinking that was going on. And, if you're going to blend film and digital, then it's a bit more complicated because then at the printing stage, you've got to test out papers and make sure that the film and digital prints hang well together, side by side. So it was a process of going to the printer and experimenting with different paper stocks. So starting out, my belief is that with a film print, you want a fiber burrito silver gelatin print. That's the gold standard. You shouldn't settle for anything less. And so it was a question of testing out different digital paper stocks so that the digital prints look good hanging next to the film print.
Okay, yeah. So you really did like a deep dive in paper and printing as well?
Yeah, I'm nerdy like that.
Yeah. Okay, you really enjoyed it as well, or?
I think so. I enjoy the technical aspects of photography as much as anyone else. I have to consciously hold myself back from nerding out about gear. I have a chat with my friends called Gear Acquisition Syndrome Club. And it's, that is it's a part of the process for me, finding the best way to achieve the result I want. And it's quite rewarding when you make it work.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay. And I heard you mention that your analog work and your digital work aren't really necessarily different. So I'm curious, when do you grab to the analog camera, or is there like or is it just how you feel that day for the camera you take outside?
There isn't a hard and fast rule. The reason why I like film is because I love the way black and white film prints look. There's a very sort of the tonal quality to a well-made silver gelatin print is to my eyes beautiful, and I don't really have a good reason why or how to explain that. And also the sort of texture that an image has with the film grain is also beautiful to me. And so I think the way I think about it is, if I'm trying to create a very clean, sharp, crisp image, so you've seen some of my images where the light is perhaps the focus, and where I've got a bit of modern architecture in the image. So I want that crispness. Then I might grab my digital camera, and then if I know that it's something perhaps a bit more lyrical, perhaps a bit softer, gentler, then I might grab my film camera. I mean, that's a really broad approximation.
Yeah.
And I mean, frankly, if I have to just grab one and go out of the house, I'll grab my digital because it's more convenient.
Very true. Yeah. But you often have both with them, or with you, or?
I mean, there was a period where I would carry both, but along the years, I found that just having one is much, much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's because realistically, you only have one pair of hands and you can only use one camera at a time.
Very, very true. Yeah. And so with both, you always do black and white, because of course for film, it's you have to choose the film, which is probably black and white. But then for digital, you never use color.
No, that's not true at all. I do actually make a lot of images in color. So one thing I'm doing right now is I'm working on a series in India. So I've been taking a few trips out there. And to me, it would be wrong to photograph India in black and white. Or perhaps I shouldn't put it in such harsh terms. There's great work coming out of India that's in black and white. But personally, for me, I think color is the way to do it. And also, it's a new challenge for myself and the way to expand my toolkit. And obviously, there's a lot of photographers that do incredible things with color. And I think it adds a layer of emotion. If you just think of an Alex Webb image from Mexico, the sultry reds, the heat of it, comes through because of the color. And it was that jump to color that I think elevated his photography into what it is today. So I do make work in color as a short answer.
Okay. So okay. And India, that's an interesting choice, because it's there's a lot to see there. Of course, it's quite popular. So I'm curious what drew you to do like multiple trips to India. And
so the first time I went was because my friend was getting married.
Okay.
He was getting married in Bangalore, and I decided to make a trip of it. So I went to Delhi, Agra, Jaipur, the sort of classic tourist triangle of India, and sort of just fell in love there. It is such a vibrant, exciting place. Quite unlike, if you live in Western Europe or the North America, quite unlike anything you might have seen in your daily life. So, visually, it's cacophony, it's chaos, and out of that comes something very interesting.
Okay.
A lot of photographers have made work out there, but I'm hoping that perhaps there's something for me to say.
Yeah. And then, because for example, I see some books behind you, like some Salgado, Sebastião Salgado, which is of course very black and white. Do you draw other inspiration, or do you look for other photographers for inspiration for this India project because it's in color then, or?
So, I mean, I do draw inspiration from other photographers, but I don't plan for a trip by looking at work from that area. So, how should I put? Basically, I don't look at Indian photographs of India when I'm heading to India, because I don't want to make the same work.
No, of course,
so
but do you look
it
like
helps to avoid that.
At others color photographers?
Yes,
could be
yes.
from anywhere, of course, but okay.
So two names stand out for me for color photography. The first is Alex Webb. hugely respect his work.
Mhm.
I think that the color adds this. His use of color is poetry. It's uh, you know so much of the image comes from the brilliant use of color and the tones coming together. Um, the image of the boy jumping in, I think, Tamaulipas in Mexico, with the blues across the image. It's beautiful. Uh, and the second name would be Harry Gruyaert.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, I
he's
think
from
it's
around here. Yeah.
precisely, yeah. And again, another genius when it comes to color. Yeah, absolutely beautiful stuff.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's true. Two very yeah, distinct names. That's very interesting. Um, but then perhaps let's go back to the book for a second. You mentioned already that you and you had it also mentioned on the website that you tried to evoke like a sense of dislocation and uncertainty. How easy was it to find that in your photos? Because it's of course very emotional aspects to the image, of course. So how did you make sure that those emotions were in your series?
I think it sort of just happened. I didn't go out. I didn't go out with my camera thinking today I'm going to photograph some dislocation and uncertainty.
Yeah.
I sort of just react to the scene before me. And after a few months, it becomes quite instinctive, doesn't it? You pick up your camera, you know what you're looking for, you see the image, and you just sort of hope that you make it work.
Mm.
Um, and out of that process for me came um, a lot of images that when I look at them, read as a sense of dislocation, perhaps a sense of uncertainty. And I think a lot of it comes down to the abstraction that I like to use in my work. So where the individual is not recognizable, or perhaps lost in a broader scene because it's been singled out by the light that is in that scene. So when I was looking at my work, it was really in retrospect, in hindsight, that I saw the themes of dislocation and uncertainty come through.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And so, did you start photographing immediately when you arrived to London? So was it because you started after 10 years, you started doing the sequence? So did you have like 10 years of work, or did you at first, because you mentioned doing the landscape and nature photography, uh, was there some of
So in
that
the early
first?
days, apologies.
No,
So
no
in
worries.
the early days, when I first came to the UK, I did have my camera with me quite a lot, and I just photographed my daily life. I would not describe that as street photography. It was more sort of pictures of my friends
Mhm.
and pictures of places I might go to when I traveled. And the character of my work back then was quite different. A lot of it was in color, and a lot of it was sort of pretty pictures of a lake I might have visited, or a church I might have visited in Europe. And for many years, I photographed in that manner without sort of great focus. I was focused on going to university and the early days of my work, and it was the turning point for me was 2019 when I wanted to really sort of find my voice in photography, I think is the way I'd put it. I felt that I'd been photographing for a while and that, the work didn't really have a coherence to it. So I actively sought out to try and learn more about photography, to experiment, and to find something that I was, interested in and that I could pursue more concretely. So
Okay.
yeah, it didn't start in 2012 when I first moved to the UK as a street photography series.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was curious to that because also you mentioned you started photographing at 14 years old. So you've been doing it for a while, but only street photography has only been like the past, what's now 5, 6 years already. Wow.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
like any kid with a camera, I just sort of, if I was at school, there was a sports race going on, I might photograph the race,
Yeah.
or I was in the photography club and we just, make pictures for the school. Yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't anything concrete.
Okay. But you didn't do street photography in Singapore before you came to London, then, or?
No, I didn't. But I do photograph. I do street photography in Singapore now, though. So whenever I head back to Singapore, I try and make a few images, and sort of the direction I'm trying to take with that is to find memories from Singapore as I used to remember it. If you know Singapore at all, you'll know that it's a city that's constantly changing. I mean, the
Mm.
skyline, every time I go back, it's slightly different. And, a restaurant that I like will have closed down and something new will be in its place. So it's a very dynamic city. And so amidst all that change, it's fun to try and find elements of it that remind me of how it used to be.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting actually. Yeah, that's a nice project as well. And so do you notice like differences between London and Singapore because they're both fairly modern cities? So is there like do you notice well, of course, architecturally, which is an important aspect for you, I think, but also like people-wise, is there a difference in how you approach it?
Well, there's so many differences. Let me focus in on perhaps one key thing that I find interesting in Singapore. And so in Singapore, we have something called the Housing Development Board, the HDB.
Okay.
And that is a government run scheme for the construction of affordable housing.
Okay.
So, whereas in the UK and in Europe, there is a social stigma associated with living in social housing, or it is perhaps perceived as not the ideal situation to be in.
Mm.
In Singapore, living in an HDB flat is just the standard thing to do. Almost everyone will buy one at some point in their lives. And I don't know the statistics, but I think it's something in excess of 70% of people live
Okay.
in HDB flats. And so the HDB estates in Singapore have a distinctive character to them. What you have is um, these very high-rise tower blocks, um, ranging from 10 to 40 stories tall, and you have them in sort of clusters with local amenities like playgrounds, food markets, and shop houses along the area. And so visually, they look quite distinctive, and they also have that there's a certain way they're decorated. So the government in Singapore likes to put very bright colors on the HDB blocks. Um, and and so that is something you do not see in London,
Mm.
where your average street is in shades of brown and grey, and accordingly, um, London and Singapore feel very different when you zoom in on that one aspect of it. Um, and then within that, there's certain things that remind me of my childhood. So one of my pictures that comes to mind is a picture of a mop head hanging out of a window to dry. And that's not really something that you will see in urban London. So yeah, visually it's quite different. And I know I mentioned bright colors in Singapore, but funnily enough, this series in Singapore is mostly in black and white for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's funny how much a city can change by just like painting the walls. Like you said, it's of course there's more to it, but sometimes just some bright colors in a city can make it so much nicer, I think, than the brown. And yeah, London sometimes just looks miserable in a way
You
because
don't
of
come to
those.
London for the sunshine, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that's okay. That's very cool. Um, and then a quote on your website that really spoke to me was it's on the page of the United Kingdom about the death of Queen Elizabeth II. And you have these quotes there that you mentioned. It simply felt wrong to watch history unfold from my sofa at home, which I found super interesting. Is that a driving factor for you to go to do all your projects like India and at home in Singapore and in London? And you have some more about there was one about like the air shows. Is that like something you have to go out to experience the world, or was it just for this one event?
Absolutely. I I don't know what it is, but I'm not content to sit at home and just sort of watch TV. That doesn't cut it for me. And I guess it's just my personality.
Mm.
I sort of enjoy it very much when I have the opportunity to go out into the world, interact with it, and and through my photography, say perhaps something distinctive. So that happened in 2022. And when the news hit that the Queen had passed away, it just didn't feel right to be sitting at home and watching TV. I just grabbed my camera and I went out to Green Park Station, where a vigil had started, and I just photographed till quite late in the evening. And over the next 2 weeks, I believe, I sort of went out almost every day with my camera, work permitting, because I just wanted to get a sense of what was going on in London. It just felt too important a moment, too significant, that to ignore. And it was very interesting for me because, they say the British love queuing. And one major aspect of that event was the long queue that formed,
Yeah.
and, people queuing for 24 hours to pay their respects to the Queen. And I think that also spoke to an element of British culture, the British psyche, that I personally, I don't understand. I wouldn't queue for 24 hours myself. But yeah, it was just something interesting that I felt that I wanted to photograph.
Mm. Okay, yeah. In a way, is it easier for you to spot these things because you weren't born and raised in London? Is it for you like because of course there's as if I walk around here in Antwerp, a lot of things pass by me because they're so obvious or so natural. So maybe like things like, yeah, of course the queue is a very big event, but are there like things that you notice that you notice more than some people from London who are maybe taking things for granted?
I think that I would notice different things than people who live in London or grew up in London, because I approach it, as somebody who grew up elsewhere,
Mm.
and many things in London are unusual to me. To give you an example, you do not get protests in Singapore; they just do not
Okay.
happen. And so when I sort of went to my first protest to photograph in London, that felt incredibly different, and I sort of reacted to that in my own way. Whenever I go to these events, I go there naturally with my own sort of
Yeah.
lived experiences, and I look, I think, for different things than a Londoner might. So I think I suppose, if you wanted to make a body of work about how someone not from London might see it, then I would have an easier time.
Yeah. I think it comes to show that everyone has their background and that makes us all look differently at things around us. So if you, in your hometown or somewhere else, you always have your own vision because of where you grew up, how you grew up, and all that thing, that kind of stuff.
I think that's precisely it, and I think
Yeah.
that's the beauty of street photography,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the streets, it's the same street, right? But
Mm.
5 different photographers walk down it, I think you'll probably get 4 different perspectives, at
Yeah.
least, if not 5.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I find very, very interesting. So you mentioned already also the gear acquisition group. Is that something like did you actively look out for like communities in London to improve your street photography, or was it more just because you have the same interest and it's fun to make friends that way, or is it really like a tool to improve your photography? If that makes sense, that question.
Sorry, just to clarify, the title of that group is just a joke. We
Okay.
don't exclusively discuss gear, but I do, I do seek out other photographers in London, and I've made a few friends along the way. Um, so I like to go out and photograph other people, because I think it changes things up,
Mm.
and it's just nice to have a chat. It's almost like you catch up with an old friend, talk about what you've been photographing, sort of bounce ideas off people, and often learn something new from them, because they'll notice something that you might not even have thought about. So along the way, yeah, there's a really good community in London. And actually, if you just go out on the weekend on a nice sunny day, you'll see many, many photographers out, some of which are familiar faces.
Okay.
And in addition to these um, friend groups I've got, I've also done a few workshops along the way with, you know, other various photographers, some about photography, some about bookmaking. And those have all been very helpful.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I can imagine, like, especially bookmaking, that it's really it's it's useful to have someone explain to you how to start with it, because it's something very uh obscure. It's a very niche skill. Street photography, yeah, there's a lot of content. It's still I can also recommend following workshops, as you say, because it's really helps looking differently at things. So that's very true. And do you often do you enjoy going out with others, or like on a regular basis, or is it more like once in a while and mostly do your street photography solo, or?
I mostly do my street photography on my own, but that's just a function of just having a busy schedule. So, my approach is I'll just have my camera on me as I go about my life. So if I'm going to meet some friends for lunch, I will just take my camera and then take a walk in that area afterwards. And so, it's not that easy to arrange catch ups with long
Yeah.
street photography sessions with other photographers, and so I just don't do it for that reason. But I do actually enjoy very much photographing with my friends, and just walking around London with them. Sometimes there's less photography and more eating or more coffee. That's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. And so is it like a small camera that you bring, or you don't mind and bring like a big one, or?
I generally try to keep it small because you know the main determinant of the quality of your street photography is the amount of time and the distance you cover. Um, so it doesn't hugely matter if you're shooting on an iPhone or a large format camera.
Hmm.
I think that influences the kind of images you might make, with sometimes a slower, heavier camera being more deliberate and a smaller, lighter camera being more reactive. The camera is not important to me. Um, it's what I found along the years. So, I'll make photos on my phone. I'll make photos on my rangefinder camera. And I've taken medium format film cameras out before. And, I use a whole bunch, maybe perhaps too many cameras.
Okay, you really change it up. That's interesting. Yeah, for me it's usually like the exact same setup every time I go out, because I don't want to think about it. But I, I can see the allure of trying different things out. For example, because you had like a series of portraits on your website made with it was a Hasselblad, forgot the specific one,
It's
and
a
that's
500 cm, yeah.
yeah. And then there you really had like a different approach to how you looked at photography, because those photos feel kind of different than the other work on your website. Was that like intentional, or?
Yes, so that project came about for me because the sort of lockdowns in London were lifting. And so, having spent a lot of time at home, uh, leaving the house again, I felt I wanted to do something to celebrate that newfound freedom. And the way I decided to do that was by photographing strangers.
Hmm.
So I sort of took my Hasselblad out, and what I would do is, it felt very unnatural at the start because street portraiture isn't something I do very often. So I would set a goal, which is I'm just going to shoot one roll of film today. And so I take my Hasselblad out with, a roll of Tri-X in the back, and just make that, just shoot, 12 pictures, it felt a very achievable goal. So I think those images are different because, as you may know, the sort of posture you have to adopt when you're using a Hasselblad is very different than other cameras because of the right angle finder.
Hmm.
So you're almost crouched over, trying to look down the chimney into the ground glass and to focus the lens. And so naturally you're photographing from a lower angle. Naturally, you're photographing from this sort of relatively unnatural, I'd say, position. And because it's so slow, it takes a while to set up. You have to be more deliberate with your communication with the subject to tell them, perhaps stand this way, look into the camera, and just, give me that 10, 20 seconds I need to actually
Hmm.
make this photograph. So your relationship with the world changes and your perspective literally changes, when you're using a camera that's built differently, like that Hasselblad.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so again, like the camera kind of, well, it doesn't dictate how you approach things, but you can approach things differently if you use a different camera. And so one roll of film, which is like 36 photos, I'm assuming, was it 36
On the Hasselblad is
different?
12
Oh,
images.
12. Okay, so was it 12 images, like 12 different people, or did you like six different people and like shoot 2 photos per person, or?
My standard practice was to make 2 pictures per person.
Okay.
So it was 6 people. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
And
but
along the way, you sort of get more comfortable and you can shoot a bit more.
okay.
But the reality of it is so many people say no that getting 6 is a good achievement.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You got so many no's? Okay. Yeah, because often I'm surprised how easy or willing people are, but then you still got plenty of no's. Okay.
Well, yeah, it's, I wouldn't say it's, you know, I can't give you a percentage, never kept track, but there were considerable proportions of people. I mean, and
Okay.
completely understandably, you might just feel that you don't look your best that day, or you might be shy, lots of reasons.
No, true, yeah. And because I mean, of course, it's a couple of photos only on your website. And did you, looking for it now, um, did you look for particular people? Like, what was it? Just vibe, or was it something that uh, drew your attention in them?
I think it was vibe. With my photography, I'm pretty instinctive,
Hmm.
and I try not to overthink, because when I overthink my photography, I don't take photos. So it would just be, somebody looks interesting. Perhaps they've got an interesting outfit, or they have an interesting sort of bearing to them. Then I would sort of try and speak to them.
Hmm.
So
I,
yeah, it wasn't that I thought, okay, I have to have 50 uh, people of this category and 50 of that category, or anything like that.
no, yeah, okay. Something you just mentioned is something I'm becoming super aware of recently, which is the if I overthink, I don't shoot as much. And for me as well, like I had like a rough period of 2 months in which I didn't really photograph anything that I really liked because I was overthinking too much. And now it's just like, okay, I have to learn to shut down my thoughts. Well, shut down, and then I all of a sudden make like 500 images in like half a day. So is that something if you go out, is there like a routine or a process you use to make sure that you get like in the right mindset, or flush out the flood of thoughts?
Well, first off, I completely agree. I've had difficult periods myself where, you know, I keep asking myself, where does this photograph go? What series does it fall into? Is it going to be a meaningful image that I can make use of down the line? And when I think about that too much, then I just don't take pictures, because it
Mm,
just feels all pointless. So I've gone out for days where I come back with virtually nothing, and that adds to the sense of frustration, and is, I think, altogether unhelpful for photography.
mm,
In terms of what I do, I found that I don't overthink when I feel inspired, and I don't mean that I have a particular end goal in mind. What I mean is just that I feel creative, and that I feel just excited to be out with my camera, and quite often that comes down to watching a movie with beautiful cinematography, which is inspiring, uplifting, in from that artistic
mm,
standpoint. And then I'll go out, sort of with that in the back of my head, and just feel uplifted by that, the genius, frankly, that you've just seen. Or it might be that I went to an exhibition and I saw work that really spoke to me, or
mm,
I bought a new photo book and felt that this person's a genius. And it's just that sense of feeling creative and feeling uplifted, and being in a good mood, that I think puts me in the right headspace to make good work. Um, Another thing that really helps is just being in fresh surroundings. So one of the reasons I just love going to India is that um, it's just so unusual. It's
yeah,
so different than my daily life, that you cannot help but react to it and feel that this is distinctive, and that this is interesting, and you therefore find it quite easy to make pictures.
yeah.
So having fresh surroundings, or just going to a new event, you know, makes things easier for photography.
Very true. Yeah, that's definitely true. I like those tips. And you mentioned watching movies. Is that something? How much did photography ruin your movie experience? As in, like, can you still enjoy it? Because sometimes, if specifically if it's a movie with very good photography, I kind of get out of the movie because I want to see or analyze the images. Do you have the same issue? And then are there like directors you really love their work and that inspire you?
So I disagree actually with you.
Okay.
I don't find that photography ruins my experience of watching films. I think on the other hand, it actually improves it because it allows me to better understand the what I'm looking at and
Mm,
to think about the genius of what's being done. So to give you two names of directors, Chris Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, pretty standard. They are the greats for me. And in terms of cinematographers, Roger Deakins, the obvious name, and Hoytema and Hoytema are really, really excellent at their craft. And what you'll see is, you know, they've taken something quite mundane, quite ordinary, and made something magical out of it. To give you
mm,
one example that sticks out to me, in the movie 1917 by Sam Mendes, the director, Roger Deakins, cinematographer, had this scene in the movie where the lead character is running down a destroyed city and it's illuminated with parachute flares. So these are flares you might put in your 40 millimeter grenade launcher and launch it to the sky, and they sort of fall down slowly because they're lit with
yeah.
parachutes. So that's how they work. And uh, because I'm Singaporean, I've done 2 years of military service and I've fired off some parachute flares and I've never looked at them in the way that Roger Deakins did. It would never
Okay.
have struck me that they are such a beautiful way to light a scene because of
Mm,
the changing light. And because they are very small light sources and they are phosphorus flares that burn very brightly, they are very hard light. And so you have these shadows raking across the landscape through the ruins of the city, casting shadows and sort of the shadows moving along as the character comes in and out of the beams of light.
mm.
And it's a really striking, deeply striking scene in the movie. And so, I look at something like that and think, there is truly, genius out there. And, I think Roger Deakins requires no introduction as a cinematographer. And, but yeah, it's really incredible, beautiful work.
It's a beautiful story actually as well. Like how you notice that and how personal it becomes as well with the military service. So that's yeah, that's very very nice. Um, and so then does because of course that's hard um, to reproduce in the streets with the phosphorus
Yeah,
flares, for example.
I'm not firing off parachute flares in London. I think I get
Yeah,
arrested.
probably. Yeah, might make a good story as well. But it does spark you to go out and look for like similar lighting experiences, or is it more like just your vibe, like, oh, this is so cool, and I'm just going out again, or
Yeah,
um,
I don't think you can go out and look for similar um, scenes to that. I mean, as you
this is
know,
a
the
very
amount of money,
specific one, yeah.
yeah, the amount of money that's spent to build a set like that and to
Hmm.
photograph that scene is untainable. And also, it doesn't really fit with the character of street photography as something, um, where it's simple, minimalistic, and
Hmm.
you are going out there to work with the tools that the world allows you to use.
Yeah.
So you're not sort of creating the scene in a sort of Gregory Crutzen kind of manner, and you're just painting with the limited canvas you've got. So I think being more than giving me specific things I want to go out and imitate, it just gives me this inspiration and this sort of sense that with creativity, with experimentation, and with a good eye, you can make very interesting things out of the ordinary. And I think that's beautiful.
Hmm. Very much so. Yeah, very true. So I'm thinking, because we have like 10 more minutes, let's say. Um, let's talk about your book again and the upcoming show in London, or gallery show in London. So of course they're linked, I assume.
That's
So
correct.
yeah. So is it? Um, I'm assuming the gallery is kind of like a best of from the book, which is already, of course, a best of from your work. Is it true or?
Yes. So basically, the exhibition is to celebrate the launch of my photo book, and I'll be showing pictures from my photo book. And I know I haven't made the final selection yet, but it will be a limited set of the images, just because the space won't allow me to hang all the pictures from the book. They would be untenable. So it's going to be in London on the 24th and 25th of October at the Aperture Gallery near Oxford Circus Station, so very central. And it's open to everyone. So anyone who listens to this podcast and lives in London, I hope to see you there.
Yeah, or visits London for the weekend, or it's not a weekend maybe. And how are you, or you're still doing it? How are you going about making the selection for what will be used in the gallery? Because of course I'm assuming it's bigger prints than it looks in the book. It's limited, so there's like a kill your darling situation.
Very much so. So it's the same method that I use for the book. Little 4x6 prints, actually just the very same prints I use to sequence the book. I just lay them out. I went to the space on the weekend, looked at it, figured out where the work might fit, and just sort of put the images on the table and try to visualize how it would look on the wall. Then I made a little mock-up in InDesign just to give myself a sense of how the framed pictures look on the wall and the sense of scale to them. I have the benefit that I've printed quite a lot of my work already previously, so I know how it looks in print. I know that it stands up well to that to the larger print size, and so I'm comfortable with the print sizes I use. I know how big the frame will be, and so that part is relatively comfortable for me. And ultimately, because I've made the book already, I know what the sequences are. I know what pairings work from the book. And so it's a question of just translating that to the space and putting together a selection. I wouldn't call it a best of, because that's not a good way to edit a body of work. It's going to be what works together and what coherently says what you wanted to say.
Yeah,
and so that's how I've approached it.
And do you notice a difference because the prints will be larger? That some photos were better in that larger format than maybe smaller in the book, or does the size of the image give you a better feel of it sometimes, perhaps?
Absolutely, the size of an image is critical, and there are some photographers out there whose work, needs to be seen at scale. So, for example, Edward Batinsky, Ukrainian Canadian photographer. So so basically, I went to see Edward Batinsky's show last year, and his photos work because they're so detailed, and they are printed so large, and you go up to them, and as you get in closer, there's a different sort of relationship you have to the image. And I just wanted to use that as an example of why scale matters, because for Edward Batinsky's work, I think he goes out there with the large format cameras precisely so that you can have that different relationship at different viewing distances. With my work, the book is obviously a lot smaller than the framework, and so there is more detail as you go up, but I don't print to Edward Batinsky scales. Generally, my standard print size is 20 inch by 16 inch. But that, I think, gives you a very comfortable viewing relationship at a regular sort of 1.52 meter distance. And so you can, I think, appreciate the image better because it feels your field of vision a little more. And, where perhaps there is a small subject lost in a larger space, there is more of an enveloping feel to it. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right that scale is important.
Yeah. It's not a small book. I saw the Instagram reels you made already for the promotion. It's not a small book either, so it's already fairly big print.
Yeah, that's right. I think because as we were discussing, some of the images are just quite detailed. So having the bigger book just helps with that.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a lot of detail that's important as well in the image, then you have to make sure people can see it. If it's a small print, then it might not stand out.
And equally, there's a lot of brilliant small books out there. So, for example, Maria Lax's Some Kind of Heavenly Fire is a very small. It's a very small volume, and it works so well because it feels like a diary. It feels like a little notebook
Mm.
of thoughts, of memories, and so uh, again, the book is such a varied medium, and that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting.
Yeah, and that's also why I was wondering because the size of the photo matters, but it doesn't have to be always bigger. But for that reason, because it's for a gallery, it's larger photos, of course. I was wondering how you went about it, because it's a different feel. And maybe, I'm not sure, like, did some photos make it into the gallery but not into the book, for example, or did you make sure the selection was always book related?
I think I'm only going to show pictures from the book
Yeah, okay.
in the gallery. Yeah,
Yeah,
just for a bit of focus.
makes sense. And then I'm curious because there's a lot of experimentation. You already mentioned, we mentioned the portraits in London. You mentioned Singapore. You mentioned India. Is there, like, I'm not sure if if you have a location wish list, but if you have like a technical wish list, or is there like a project you're thinking of that's like something you would want to do?
Frankly, I've been so focused on getting the book out lately
Yeah.
that I haven't really been thinking about future directions.
Mm.
And I imagine it will come about very much like the rest of my work, which is organically and almost instinctively. Something will catch my eye, and along out of that will come a project.
Mm. Yeah.
So
So
I'll
you're not.
continue
Yeah.
working on my India series. I'm
Mm-hmm.
planning to return later this year and hopefully next year too, if I can. I'll continue working on Singapore, which is just something I do every time I go back. And there's so many places in the world I'd like to visit. I think next on my list is Texas. I've heard so much about it, and I'm quite curious about it. It seems, they say everything is bigger in America, and apparently it's even bigger in Texas. So I'm curious about that.
Okay, that's very curious. Yeah, maybe like for a second on the India series, because you mentioned that you're not really thinking about the next series, which I can imagine, because it's not always fun or interesting to keep working on one project. But for example, for India, are you, I'm not gonna say shoot randomly now, but is it more like an open and see what then catches your eye to make a series, or?
So I've made 4 trips now to India, and I think it's coming to the point where I have to start narrowing it down,
Mm.
um, and where I have to look out for certain things. So what precisely that is, I really honestly don't know right now, because I haven't done the work. I haven't sat down to curate my images. But at some point, I'll sit down before my next trip, look at what I've made already, and try to find the sort of distinctive point to that I'm making, or the distinctive thing I have to say, and pursue that more deeply. Because there needs to be, for that body of work, there needs to be more focus now.
Yeah, but for now, you kind of cast your nets fairly wide and not be too specific about this or that. It's more like everything that's interesting, I'll photograph up to now.
That's right. So
Yeah.
I think there are different phases to any project. So the initial, I mean, just speaking for myself, it almost always starts with just experimentation and going out and just doing what feels natural and right. And then along the way, you have to impose perhaps a bit more of a bit more order to it, a bit more structure. And then that's where, the restrictions come into play, and where you, you know, have to discard some of, as you said earlier, kill your darlings.
Yeah.
So, you know, for the India work, that's coming to that second phase now, I feel.
Okay, that's cool. So I'm gonna do the introduction in a second, but maybe it's interesting for you to repeat just about the book and the exhibition, where people can buy the book and visit the exhibition.
Sure, thank you, Fred. Yep. So my new book, Journey to the West, published by Sonata Books, is now out. This is a collection of my street photography in black and white, and it's organized around the theme of the experience I had in my early years of moving from Singapore to the UK. which I've tried to evoke using the anonymity, geometry, and formal visual language of my photography. The exhibition is to celebrate the launch of my photo book. It will be held in London at the Aperture Gallery on Riding House Street near Oxford Circus. So anyone who is in London, I hope to see you there.
Yeah, and of course I'm putting the links for it in the description, so people are sure to find the right book and the right exhibition. So thank you, Wei Jian, for the time and insights. Very interesting. If anyone wants to follow him, of course, his links are in the description. Make sure to follow his amazing photos on his website or on Instagram, but you're not super active on Instagram, I noticed. But of course, the website is perfect for this. Also, make sure to follow the podcast in your favorite platform. Doesn't really matter which platform as long as you follow it. And of course, you can also follow me for updates on social media for new episodes. And again, all the links to everything we mentioned will be in the show notes, which is linked in the description. So thank you, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Fred.